Our mission at SD Bullion is clear: the lowest cost gold and silver available online. While we do not have pretty blue boxes, free shipping, 4% credit card fees, or glamorous gold and silver infomercials, SD Bullion has the lowest prices that may save you hundreds on your next order. So before you make your next investment, do the math and join the over 15,000 new customers who have recently made the switch to SD Bullion. Why pay more?
Hey everyone, this is Elijah Johnson with FinanceAndLiberty.com, and back with us today is Ann Barnhardt from the former Barnhardt Capital Management. Ann, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me again, Elijah. It's always a pleasure.
All right. Well, you've recently been talking about the rule of law and how it no longer exists. You've talked about that if the rule of law no longer exists, no economy can persist for long. Did you want to discuss a little bit about this?
Well, sure. I mean, there's been a clack of us for the last several years who have been screaming and screaming and screaming about this. And really, the big watershed event was obviously the Obama usurpation of the White House, and that was the death knell. That was the death of the constitutional republic of the United States. And now I just refer to what is in Washington, D.C. as the Washington, D.C. regime, because it is no longer the United States of America. And just within the past couple weeks, with all of this, with this executive amnesty that he did, are people finally acknowledging and acting all shocked and coming to this amazing realization that, well, wait a minute. This isn't even America anymore. There's no rule of law. There's no constitution. The executive branch, the White House, is just doing unilaterally anything that it wants, rubbing it in everyone's faces. There's no redress. There's no recourse. The legislative branch is completely sidelined, marginalized, useless. They will not do anything to stop any of this. It seems to us that, wow, maybe the people in the legislative branch, maybe they're on board with all of this. Maybe they're complicit in all of this, that they have no interest in stopping this steamrolling and this destruction of the constitutional order and the rule of law and also the enabling bureaucracy. Well, of course that's the case, because the people in the legislative branch, they are members of the oligarchy, which has overthrown the constitutional republic, and they are becoming enriched and empowered themselves, specifically because there is no rule of law, and because that then allows them to just loot and loot and loot the system, and to behave and do all manner of horrific and vile things, knowing that there will never be any action taken against them. There will be no law enforcement because there is no rule of law. They are members of the oligarchy. They operate above the law. Now, like I said, there's a clack of us who have been screaming about this and warning about this for years, since the Obama usurpation. And I know that, a lot of people do not like to hear about this. This just turns people off and makes them cringe, but I refuse to capitulate to this social pressure on this point. Barack Obama was not and is not eligible to be the president of the United States. This is an objective fact. It is an objective fact. Barack Obama, not eligible to be president of the United States according to Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution of the United States. He is not a natural-born citizen. Open admission. In fact, it was one of his selling points that he was the child of a Kenyan national, not a natural-born citizen. He is not the child of two citizen parents by his own admission. And then there's all kinds of stuff beyond that. The fact that he was adopted by an Indonesian means that he became an Indonesian national by definition of the rule of law. And he has never released any of his college transcripts, presumably because he attended college as a foreign student. Okay, people say, well, you guys are just crazy loon conspiracy theorists. In fact, I hosted a dinner party at my home just on Saturday night and was called at my own dinner table a loon conspiracy theorist, and not in a funny, joking way, in a contemptuous way. It was called a loon conspiracy theorist. One of the reasons is because I refuse to capitulate on this point. It is so critical. If you can't enforce the small things, not that this is a small thing, but in the big scheme of things, when we're talking about usurping and overthrowing the most powerful nation economically and militarily in the history of humanity, I guess you could say that in the hierarchy of things, whether or not Barack Obama is the child of two American citizen parents is on the list of that hierarchy a relatively minor thing relative to destruction of the economy. You know, they openly admit that the national debt is now over $18 trillion. It was 10 and change when he came into office. The Reformation and the enablement and the arming of the Islamic Caliphate, all of that, the dissolving of the Mexican border, the stacking of the electorate, which was a goal that was articulated decades and decades ago by this cadre of people, this hive that was centered out of Columbia University. These are macro dynamics. Whether or not Barack Obama's parents are both U.S. citizens is admittedly on the hierarchy a less important point. However, it is still utterly, utterly crucial, because if you refuse to enforce the rule of law on these relatively minor issues, such as presidential eligibility, if you refuse to enforce the rule of law, the consequences of that are massive and cascading, because once it goes, it spreads out into everything, and it spreads out into anarchy, which then, what anarchy is no enforcement of the rule of law. The biggest thug wins. And again, this is something that has been said openly by these people, these members of this Washington, D.C. oligarchical, tyrannical regime, is that they understand, quote unquote, and they model themselves after Mao in China. And Mao said, all political power comes from the barrel of a gun. These people have stated this openly, okay? That means you have no rule of law, you have anarchy, and the biggest thug wins. And these people are conscienceless, psychopathic thugs. And the only thing that will keep those people in check and will keep them from destroying your country and destroying your civilization, the thread that maintains civilization, that civilization is hanging from, is the rule of law. That is now gone. How can you possibly expect, with no rule of law, how can you possibly expect any economic paradigm to persist, to thrive, to not just utterly collapse in upon itself? Because everything in an economy, at the end of the day, is based one way or another on trust between individuals and the ability to have some sort of legal redress when one person deals dishonestly with another person. In this environment, there's no equal protection. There's no one to turn to. The only thing that matters is who you are and who you know. You can commit crimes, flagrant, enormous crimes, out in the open. And as long as you are in tight or a member of this oligarchy, you can literally get away with murder. And of course, the poster boy of this is John Corzine, beating this horse to death. Again, I know, but it's confirmation of the fact that there is no rule of law, and that it's just completely over on the North American landmass. The man steals, just plain as day, $1.6 billion in segregated customer funds, and nothing happens. nothing happens. In fact, the government helps cover the crime, helps enable the crime. The judiciary helps and assists in filing a completely illegitimate bankruptcy filing designed to keep the money out of the hands of the people whose property it was, who it was stolen from, namely the customers, and instead to funnel the money into the coffers of the mega bank counterparties. The whole thing, the actions of the exchange itself, the exchange, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, the CME Group, refusing to execute their legal fiduciary duty, their entire reason for existing, and that is backstopping firms when they fail like this and maintaining the integrity of the markets and protecting the customers. Utterly failed in their duty, broke laws from here to eternity. Nothing happens. Nobody cares. Everybody just shrugs it off. You can't have a functioning economy if everything is based on lying, cheating, stealing, and grift. Okay? And that's where we are. The rule of law is gone. We are in an anarchical situation. And that, there are people out there who call themselves anarcho-capitalists and, oh yeah, let's get rid of all government. No. This is imbecility. You have to have a functioning rule of law. You have to have equal protection under the rule of law in order to have any hope of any sort of economic recovery or a functioning economy at all, much less recovery. That's why when I shut down my brokerage firm in November of 2011, one of the concluding paragraphs, and it's actually the paragraph that Rush Limbaugh, in fact, honed in on and read on the airs when I said, I will not, under any circumstance, consider reforming or reopening Barnhardt Capital Management unless and until the Obama regime is out of power and the Washington, D.C. regime is reconstituted and repopulated such that I am confident that once again there is a functioning rule of law on the North American landmass, because it would be insane for me to have any other position. It would be insane for me to restart a brokerage firm and go back and try to engage this exact same monstrous entity, this lawless, thieving claque of thugs, thinking that the results will somehow be different. I don't anticipate that in my life I will ever be able to re-engage the financial markets. The assumption that I work under is that there is going to be a massive war, which I do not anticipate surviving. I anticipate that I will die unnaturally in that war. If, however, I should survive this war, even after that, from where I sit right now, it just seems fantastical to me to think that, I'm 38 years old, that within my natural lifetime, that we are going to be able to, barring some sort of supernatural intervention, that we are going to be able to reestablish the rule of law such that one will be able to have derivatives markets, which, as I said in my shutting down the brokerage letter, derivatives markets by definition require an incredibly firm base. They require the rule of law in spades. And from where I sit right now, because it's all gone, and because the United States is gone, and the United States was kind of the bulwark of this concept of the rule of law for the entire planet. Now that the United States no longer exists and has been overthrown, it's not going to be like World War II where, the presence of the United States enabled the very rapid rebuilding of Europe, of Western Europe, and enabled the very rapid rebuilding of Japan. That all happened, and it happened so rapidly, and it was able to be accomplished precisely because the United States existed, and there was this, undergirding foundation of the rule of law on the planet to allow that to allow those cultures to rebuild and flower within a matter of just a few decades. Now that the United States is gone, where are you going to look? Are you going to look to China? Are you going to look to Moscow and Putin for this? Where are you going to look? This is insanity. I mean, those people are thug, oligarchical tyrants in exactly the same way that the Washington, D.C. regime is. And in many cases, perhaps even worse. I mean, China has right now horrific human rights violations, as does Russia. These are profoundly sick cultures, profoundly sick. They are in no position to provide any sort of moral leadership, most certainly with regards to the rule of law. It will take decades upon decades, if not centuries upon centuries, barring supernatural intervention, for civilization to even begin to rebuild itself once the rule of law is lost. And it has now been lost. And sadly, people are just now coming to this realization in the United States.
Right. And you mentioned in your article that one of the reasons people aren't realizing yet that there is no rule of law anymore is because they're just focusing on today's news. They're not remembering MF Global, what happened with MF Global. They're not remembering, as you pointed out, that it seems like Obama might not even be eligible to be president. They're forgetting these things because they're just paying attention to what's happening right now. I mean, I even have to confess that I do this sometimes. When I'm preparing for my interviews, I often try to pick the newest and most interesting topics. But I agree, we also need to focus on the important things in the past in order to see what led us to where we are now.
Well, there's two dynamics here. First of all, the contemporary man's memory cycle is about 36 hours, and this is a function of the media. It's this weird dynamic where people are so detached from reality that they view these things that are going on, like what goes on in Washington, D.C., like, for example, right now what's going on in Ferguson, et cetera, et cetera. I am convinced that psychologically people view these not as things that are actually really happening, but they view them in their minds in exactly the same way that they view entertainment, that they view television shows and movies. And they are psychologically unable to parse the difference. And so, whatever is happening with regards to the Washington, D.C. regime, whatever the scandal du jour is, whether it's Benghazi, whether it's, the IRS, whether it's the amnesty and dissolving the border, et cetera, psychologically, these things are all treated like episodes of a television show. And once it's over, once that 36-hour news cycle is over, then people psychologically just forget these things. And they view them to be much like television entertainment. And so people with IQs that are, a few points higher than the people who are watching Ballroom Dancing with the Stars and Honey Boo Boo and shows like that, those people are deriving their entertainment from watching these events unfold in the political sphere and in the financial sphere and in the global sphere. But they don't psychologically deal with the fact that these things are real and they're actually happening. And in fact, they delude themselves into believing that because these events have not yet personally, violently impacted them, because their account has not been swept and stolen, because they have not been, their house or their business has not been looted and torn down, because their loved one has not been murdered by someone who came across the Mexican border, because nothing like that has actually yet happened to them, that A, it doesn't matter, and B, it isn't real. And that's where we are. It's all a function of this entertainment mentality, which is why item number 1 in my 5-point list of positive steps that people should be taking in order to combat all this, step number 1 is media strike. Cancel the cable or satellite feed. Stop watching this stuff. Stop partaking of this stuff. Stop engaging this as if it's entertainment, because that's how it's being packaged and fed to you. Stop feeding this evil propaganda arm that's working in close concert and is literally fed its talking points by the Washington, D.C. regime and the banksters and all of these other people. And people can call you a loon and people can call you a conspiracy theorist. But this is an objective fact. And you have to, at the end of the day, you have to stop and make a decision about whether or not you're going to cooperate in this or not. And one of the things that you are doing to cooperate in this is if you're sending $100 a month or $200 a month or whatever it is, if you are in any way supporting this media system, which is poisoning the culture between misinformation, propaganda, and pornography that it is spitting out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, not just to you, but to your neighbors. See, that's the criticism I have. If you're paying for cable and you come back at me and you say, well, Ann, I never watch this and such channel, that and such channel. I never watch MTV. I never watch any of that. It doesn't matter. You're subsidizing it. Every single month, every one of those channels gets a cut of what you're paying them. You are subsidizing for that pornographic garbage to be pumped into the home of your neighbor whose 7-year-old daughter is sitting there watching Miley Cyrus on MTV. Even if you never watch CNN or MSNBC and Al Sharpton and all of that, if you're a cable subscriber or a satellite subscriber, you are paying Al Sharpton. You're paying Al Sharpton because a percentage of your monthly bill is going to MSNBC and is thus paying his salary. You're paying for that. You are supporting it by allowing it to continue and perpetuate. This has to stop. If you can't even cut the cord from TV, if you can't even do that, how in the world do you think you are going to fight a hot war against these people? Make no mistake, that is what is going to be required to get rid of this. Once you lose the rule of law, and again, we've been screaming this for years, it requires a hot shooting war to get it back, absent a supernatural intervention. That's where we are. You have made your bed and now you will sleep in it. You have guaranteed by permitting this breakdown of the rule of law to go completely uncontested, there must now be a hot war, and it will be the mother of all wars. It will be a world war, and it will be the death and the brutality that will come from this war. The amount of people who will be killed in this war will make World War I and World War II look like gentlemen's disagreements by comparison.
Now, still discussing about this absence of the rule of law, you've talked before about how the absence of the rule of law comes from both ends of the political and economic extremes, which are unrestrained capitalism and Marxist communism. Could you tell our viewers how both of these systems result in no rule of law?
Sure. I mean, unrestrained capitalism is basically, like I said earlier, it's anarchy. Anarchy is what is on one extreme, and totalitarian communism is what is on the other extreme. And the title of that essay that I wrote is I can't remember the exact title, but the word I used for this is the spectral donut. The spectrum is not a line. The spectrum is a torus, for those of you who know what that means in mathematics. A torus, T-O-R-U-S, is the fancy pants word in mathematics for a donut, okay? So the two extremes, anarchy and totalitarianism, they actually are basically the same thing because it is power from the barrel of a gun. That's what it is in totalitarian communism. That's exactly the same thing as what it is in anarchy. The biggest thug wins. There is no rule of law. Whoever is willing to kill and steal and lie and cheat the most that's who's going to acquire the most wealth, the most power, et cetera, et cetera. And so, this whole notion of right, left, this, that, if we swing far enough over to the right and get rid of all government, then all of our problems will be solved. No, that is not accurate. That is not true. Government, qua government, is a good thing. There needs to be a rule of law, equal protection thereunder, with a means of redress, where everybody has a means of redress. That means government. That doesn't mean anarchy, okay? Because you don't have a rule of law just by going out and having lynch mobs and killing people. And so it's very important to remember this. And that's what's so terrifying to me right now, is that it seems to me that there are so few people who are truly worthy of being leaders of men, and who are truly worthy of being politicians in the pure sense of the word, people who are capable of thinking and implementing laws for the good of an entire society. Our society is so degraded right now that people are unable to think. They're unable to think in logical progressions and think things through. Even among the so-called people on the right, there's still such a degraded morality and an inability to think. And I mean, don't even get me started on the so-called Republican Party and all of that. I would remind everybody of what I refer to as the Barnhardt axiom, and that is, in this day and age, the fact that a person is seeking or holding public office is proof in and of itself that the person is psychologically and or morally unfit to hold public office. Why in the world would a decent human being engage this political system, which is rotten to the core? It is completely degraded and rotten to the core. Why would a decent human being even think for a second that they should engage that? The fact that someone would engage it at all indicates to me that A, they don't understand the situation at all, which means they're intellectually unfit to hold office, or B, they view this system as a means for themselves to acquire power, wealth, and perhaps even sex, because those are the three main things that people are looking for when they engage these corrupt systems. It's power, money, and sex, and you could argue that sex is a subset of power, but those are the big three. That's what these psychopathic personality types are chasing. If you're on the right, if you're a quote unquote Republican, tell me that doesn't apply to characters like Mitt Romney, John Boehner, John McCain. These men are despicable. They're absolutely despicable human beings. They're not worthy to be leading anything. Most of them should be in prison right now. They're all oath breakers, every single one of them. They're all liars. They're all manipulators. They're all thieves. They're all extortionists. All of these political campaigns, all they are money-making rackets, raising hundreds of millions, if not now into the billions of dollars, soliciting money from the useful idiots, from the plebes. And then what they do is they just invoice and cross-invoice each other, and people become multi-millionaires just purely off of these campaigns and setting up consulting firms, et cetera, et cetera. And people just keep falling for this and falling for this and falling for this. And if we just wave the flag, I mean, how many hours did it take after the alleged drubbing of, the Democrats and picking up all of these seats in Congress and picking up control of the Senate and sending this signal and this repudiation to Obama? How many hours was it before the Republican Party completely capitulated to the entire thing? Oh, we're not going to do anything to stop the executive amnesty. Impeachment is completely off of the table. We will never, ever put that on the table. It was literally a matter of hours before the capitulation came. Why is that? Because they're in on it too. It's all just a money-making racket. And until people wise up, and purge all of that. They're all going to have to be purged. And again, if you can tell me a way that that can happen that does not involve hot war, wherein the rule of law can be reestablished and we send a signal in this culture that corruption will not be tolerated and there will be justice and there will be massive consequences up to and including execution for high crimes and misdemeanors and treason. If you can tell me a way that this can all be fixed without that, I'm all ears. But I'm an intelligent, realistic person, and I know that outside of supernatural intervention, there is no solution that fits that. There is none.
Now, you wrote an article about this, that unrestrained capitalism and communism always tend towards no rule of law. And what we're seeing right now, as we've been discussing this whole interview, is that we are moving towards no rule of law. And you discussed in your article that when this happens, we should run away at full speed. Do you want to discuss what you mean by that?
Sure. And I mean, I want to correct you. I really don't like the use of the term unrestrained capitalism, because that has never existed, ever. This is a non-existent phenomenon, and we're nowhere even close to that right now. Capitalism is massively restrained. There's massive regulation to the point of being onerous and corrupt. That's not what we're moving towards. What we're moving towards is no rule of law and an anarchy that is derived from there not being any rule of law. That's not to say that these totalitarian oligarchs are not going to come at people and come at their enemies with all manner of regulations that are specifically designed to destroy their enemies. What do you think Obamacare is? That has absolutely nothing to do with delivering health care to anyone. All that's about is redistributing wealth, enriching the oligarch class, and having control, being able to control people, and being able to destroy the middle class and destroy businesses through this onerous healthcare delivery paradigm and bureaucracy. So unrestrained capitalism, that's not what we're talking about. This is a big distinction. The anarchy is that there's no equal protection under the law. There is no rule of law. That's what we're talking about. But there's still a massive regulatory paradigm. Now, in answer to your question, my 5-point plan in terms of running away and getting the hell out of there. Step 1, as I said earlier, media strike. Step 2, education system strike. If you have kids in public school, I'm sorry, but that's tantamount to child abuse in my mind. Do you not watch and read the news? Do you not see the sickness and the perversion that is being taught to even the youngest children in the schools today? And I'll be the first one to say that the Catholic schools on the North American continent aren't much better either. You need to get your children out of that mess. And this is why I was ribbing you earlier. I mean, college, seriously? Universities, seriously? Seriously? These are hives of iniquity and contra-education. It isn't just that they're honestly making mistakes. They are contra-educating children and young people. They're teaching them how not to think. They're teaching them how to be just completely unthinking drones to this totalitarian oligarchy. Why in the world would you send your children into that? Why in the world would you send your children into the sick, depraved, satanic cultures that we see on every college campus in the United States today? And furthermore, why would you put your children into debt by sending them into that paradigm and just running up 6-figure debt right at the beginning of their life? In exchange for what? In exchange for being contra-educated? I mean, this is insanity. This is, again, just all pure conformity to the culture. Well, I have to do this, and, we're too good, and I can't actually work with my hands or anything like that, so I'm going to go get some BS degree in communications or some nonsense like that. and spend the rest of my life with some cushy, meaningless service job that contributes nothing to society. I mean, this is insanity. Get out of the education system. What's next? 3 is, of course, tax strike, which I undertook years ago. I mean, basically right after MF Global. There's just no way. No more. I consented to paying taxes to the federal government of the United States of America. When it became just undeniably clear to me that the United States of America was gone and dead and was never ever coming back, how could I continue to pay taxes? I consented to pay taxes to the United States of America. I did not consent to pay taxes to this skid mark on the bath towel of history that is the Washington, D.C. regime. Absolutely not. No way. I will not be consenting to a totalitarian oligarchy that usurped the constitutional republic that I was born into. Absolutely not. Next comes point 4, which is general strikes, work stoppages, and I think something that could be done that would be extremely effective and nonviolent would be shutting down interstates. People just saying enough is enough of this. This government has to be liquidated. There has to be some sort of massive change. And we're just all going to go and drive onto the interstates and park our cars on the interstates and stop everything until this government is completely liquidated and we can start over again. Oh, believe you me, if people went out and blocked the interstate highways around all of the major metro areas in the United States, there would be enormous consequences and they would be fast. General strike is next. And then finally, point 5 is hot war. Now, because no one will do number 1, which is the media strike, that tells me that nothing is going to be done, and therefore you just sit and wait until the whole thing implodes upon itself and skips directly to point 5, which is hot war. And I know that, Americans are armed, but it's not looking good. Because I'm just skeptical at this point. I'm so skeptical after all of the crimes that have been committed in the United States by this Washington, D.C. regime. The fact that no one has lifted a finger and no one has done anything, even despite the fact that the people are armed. I do not see them mounting any sort of a significant resistance at all. I see the southern border has already been dissolved. And I can see, an invading force coming in across the southern border, which, again, people like me were warning about in 2009 when Obama usurped the White House. This is going to end with foreign boots on the ground. And the 3 sources would be China, Russia, and the Islamic Caliphate. And I use the term, the Islamic Caliphate, and was laughed at and mocked and derided. And the Islamic Caliphate now exists. It is called the Islamic State, IS. The Obama regime refers to it the Islamic State in the Levant, ISIL. The Levant is the Eastern Mediterranean, and the reason why he calls it the Levant and not the original name, the Islamic State in Syria, ISIS, or just IS, the Islamic State. The reason why he always says the Islamic State in the Levant is because that includes Israel. That's a pure dog whistle that he's sending. So I was laughed at, I was mocked and derided. The Islamic State, the Islamic Caliphate, has been facilitated and reformed, and it was armed through the weapons depot at Benghazi. And again, everybody just sat by and watched that all happen. Nobody did anything about it. The alleged hero of the last midterm election cycle, Alan West, hero of the Tea Party, he voted. He voted in favor of funding Obama's illegal incursion into Libya to establish that weapons depot at Benghazi. That's why the Barnhardt axiom exists. seeking or holding public office today is proof in and of itself that a given person is psychologically and or morally unfit to hold public office. I wish I had something more positive to say. I wish that I had, more concrete solutions that people could do. But at this point, it's too late. I mean, it's just too late. We tried and tried and tried. We screamed and screamed and screamed. Many people read me and read lots of other people, and in retrospect, I now realize that what we were providing wasn't information, we were providing entertainment. We were just perceived as entertainment and nothing more. And sometimes I wonder, did I do the right thing at all? Should I have just stayed quiet? Did I actually commit a sin by providing not a warning, but just a spectacle and entertainment for people to watch and listen to? I don't know. I'll find out at my particular judgment. And I don't know if I'm still doing the same thing. I don't know. But I do know that it's too late now. And what I'm doing and what I'm focusing on and what I would hope everyone out there would do and what I would hope they would focus on is prayer and repentance and buckling down and preparing, because war is coming.
Well, Ann Barnhardt, thank you so much for sharing your insights today, and thank you so much for your efforts. And I really do think people don't just view it as entertainment. They've really found it very helpful. If our viewers would like to find out more, did you want to share with them where they can find you?
Oh, of course. I'm still at www.barnhardt, that's BARNHARDT.biz, B-I-Z.
This video was brought to you by ReluctantPreppers.com. Click here to watch Reluctant Preppers' Encore presentation with Ann Barnhardt, where Ann Barnhardt explains how your savings are being robbed from you.